Good morning. It is 10:03, so we are going to go ahead and get started today. Thank you again for joining us for our monthly ECAP Recap webinar series. My name is Shanna Weber, and I am an environmental education specialist with the Kentucky Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. And we are so excited that you were all able to join us this morning as we learn just a little bit more about Kentucky's nutrient reduction strategy. Now, before I hand the presentation over to our guest speaker today and we dive into today's topic, I do just want to do a little bit of webinar housekeeping. It's going to be short and sweet today because Josiah has a lot of great information to share with us. So let's go ahead and get started. First things first, if you're here with us and you can hear me and see my screen, you should be pretty much all set. We have had some problems in the past where attendees haven't been able to see our speakers' screens. So if that is happening for you, feel free to leave the event and join back in using that same link. That does seem to help for everyone in the past. So if you do have any problems at all, feel free to try that. And if that's still not working for you, feel free to send me a message and hopefully we can get that figured out for you. Now, everyone besides our presenters are on listen-only mode, so you will not have access to your microphone or camera. But if you do have any questions at all throughout today's webinar, we do ask that you use either the Q&A feature or the chat feature on the top of your screen, and we will try to get to your questions by the end of the webinar. And finally, with that being said, I do want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded, and I'll be working to send out the webinar recording in hopefully just a few short days as soon as I can get it uploaded and everything. So be on the lookout for an email, a post-event email, hopefully by tomorrow afternoon with the webinar recording. Like I said, very short and sweet today because we have a lot of great information. If you do ever have any questions, I always like to just pitch this in here. If you have any questions about air, waste, or water regulations in Kentucky, feel free to reach out to the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. I'm going to have our phone number and email address on the slide at the end of today's webinar. So any questions at all, feel free to always reach out to us. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to our guest speaker today, Mr. Josiah Frey. Josiah is an environmental scientist consultant with the Kentucky Division of Water. Josiah, thanks for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Shanna. I appreciate you all having me here, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit about our nutrient reduction strategy with you all. As Shanna mentioned, I'm Josiah Fry. I work at the Kentucky Division of Water in the director's office, and I lead our nutrient reduction strategy and some of our success communication when it comes to making sure we're telling Kentucky's story and also communicating effective progress for the Division of Water. I am going to share my screen here in a second, but before I get much further, I want to say that everything we've got that I'm going to cover today is on our webpage, and I'm going to put the link in the chat for that webpage. It's here. It's a hyperlink. If you copy and paste that into your browser, it'll bring you up there, and I will go ahead and start sharing. All right. So this is our nutrient reduction strategy webpage. Like I said, everything that we'll be covering today is here, and specifically, it's going to be in this under this Explore tab. So if you need to reference it in the future, there's a lot of great resources. We have a nutrient newsletter. We have a recently released biennial report and some other things that will also be linked at the bottom of this strategy story map. So I'll get started. Our nutrient reduction strategy, what is it and why do we have it? Kentucky is one of 12 states that is part of something called the Hypoxia Task Force, which is a federal task force to reduce nutrient pollution and load deliveries to the Gulf of Mexico. The impetus started probably about 20 years ago. There is every year there's a large algal bloom in the Gulf of Mexico that is it causes a low oxygen zone. That means that all the fish and critters that live in the ocean end up either dying off or having to move out of it. And what that means is it means that a lot of fishermen have they have reduced catches. You have a degradation of water quality, but it also extends up to us, and we have algal blooms in our lakes and reservoirs as well. So this is part of the reason why this is important for us. I'm gonna move this up here. So, there we go. Locally, there are a couple issues with nutrients, and when I say nutrients, I'm specifically talking about nitrogen and phosphorus. Um, One is that they feed what are called harmful algal blooms. They're toxic algal blooms that occur typically in the late summer, largely in reservoirs or stagnant water. This is an issue for a number of reasons, both recreation. It is an issue for drinking water taste and odor, but it's also an issue for water quality, both for our critters and fish that live in the water. Um, but it's also a drinking water concern for us. Beyond all that, it is a concern for us because of the loss of productive farm soil. Um, there are parts of this country that lose inches of soil a year. And each inch of that soil can take hundreds of years to develop. So it's one of those things that it's in our best interest to manage this effectively. Um, like I said, the Gulf hypoxia is a very real issue. And just so you all have an understanding of what this is, so this is the area that is covered by this hypoxia task force, is the Mississippi River, Mississippi and Atchafalaya drainage basin. You can see Kentucky has every bit of Kentucky drains into this. Some states don't entirely, but the task force is these Mississippi River bordering states, so Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and all the way up into Minnesota. But what happens every year is there's this region in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, what do you want to call it, that has this dead zone. And this is a live NOAA mapper of what the dead zone looks like. So if you come back to this map at different times of the year, you can kind of see as it grows. Typically, this will get to be about the size of the combined size of Connecticut and Rhode Island combined. So this is a very large zone. Um, and the federal government and states have been tracking this for some time, to try and identify, what are the trends and what are the patterns, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do with this nutrient reduction strategy, and actually, before I go much further, most of the elements in this in this story map are identified in our strategy. This is simply kind of an interactive way of exploring the strategy, and it also links to a number of other resources. But one of the things that we wanted to do with this strategy, so in 2014, we published a draft strategy. And each state in the hypoxia task force is required to have a strategy. We've all committed to it. And then in 2022, we updated that strategy. And that strategy is critical for us as a state because it allows us to take control of our own destiny in managing our nutrient resources and our programs, without having to fit a one size meets all formula, right? All the states have their own strategy, and they usually get updated um, on a semi-regular basis. Everybody has some sort of regular reporting mechanism, but we all have these kind of updates as data becomes more available, as we see changes in the landscape, as our programs update and evolve. We update these strategies. But one of the things that we've noticed routinely is Kentucky is just not the same as a lot of the states in the hypoxia task force. We are probably most analogous to Tennessee. but we are not. We're simply different. Part of the reason is because of our landscape, our geography, and our industry, our agriculture landscape. We have the largest beef cattle herd east of the Mississippi. Our equine industry is also notable, um, but we also have some of the highest concentrations of phosphorus in our bedrock and our soil. That's why the equine industry is in central Kentucky for a very good reason, and that is because of the phosphatic soils. Um, what that also means is we have to be really, really careful with those soils because they're prone to erosion. They're not very deep compared to some of our neighboring states. So we really have to manage that resource, that extremely abundant resource well. We represent only about 6.7% of the entire drainage area. Um, but that doesn't mean we only have 6.7% of the problem, because, and I'll get to that later, but our trends are a little bit different than some other states. And when it comes to population pressures and density, we're kind of right in the middle of the country. We're not growing like some certain states are, but we're also not declining. We're stagnant like others. So we're kind of in the middle, and so that creates some interesting dynamics. The other thing that's interesting about Kentucky is we really do have a unique um, agriculture industry. I always kind of share the anecdote that when I've been out to my aunt and uncles in Alabama, they talk about how hard it is for farmers markets to make it, right? That's not our problem. We don't have a problem with farmers markets. We have an abundance of farmers markets all across the state, producing all sorts of goods and services. And it's not just livestock. It's not just horses. Um, we have horticulture. We have fruits and veggies. Um, we have poultry, eggs. We have the commodities like the grain commodities like corn and soybeans. But we also have wheat, which contributes to our bourbon industry. We have produce. We have a number of things that really contribute to a really vibrant agriculture economy, which we're really blessed with. But it also means that there is no such thing as a one size fits all um, approach to this strategy. Um, so what that means is we took back in 2020 we took a a fairly data-centric approach to this issue. Kentucky is also blessed to have an abundant and long-standing monitoring network. Um, this is Kentucky's ambient rivers monitoring network. Just for your awareness, all these dots represent monitoring stations. Some that go back to the late 70s. People in this agency a long time ago had a very clear-eyed vision for what this state would need, and it's set us up in a really, really wonderful situation where we have data that goes back a long time, so we don't have to rely solely on models to understand what our nutrient balance is, where we have higher concentrations of nutrients, where we are doing well, where we need to do some more work and see improvement. We have that data. And I know from talking to some of our neighbors, they're very envious of that. And so it's something that we as Kentuckians should be really proud of, that we have this really fantastic resource. So anyway, we did in 2020, we took data from that. Yes, let me finish this, and then I'll get to the question. Um, we took that data and we ran it through some national modeling statistics um, to identify what our loads and our yields are. And when I say loads, I just mean think mass balance, like just the sheer volume of nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus coming through watershed. And the yields is kind of like a concentration. And so what you're seeing in this map here is a breakdown of the concentrations, those yields by watershed. So areas that are red Again, this is an interactive map. You can look into the different parts of the data, have a higher concentration of, and I think in this case, this is nitrogen. Oh, I'm sorry, this is phosphorus. Because again, phosphorus is important to us because of our natural background that we have to also manage. So yes, I saw a question. Would you like to ask a question? Here's Jamie.
Jamie, if you still had that question, I allowed your mic, so you should be able to unmute and ask it.
Okay, well, if you want to hold that to the end, we'll address it later as well. So anyway, this map shows kind of the trajectory that a number of watersheds are on. So this is about a 20-year look at the data. You can see certain parts of Western Kentucky. The thing is, the Shane watershed had a higher yield, along with some of our areas in Central Kentucky, and that was not a surprise to us. Again, because of either the land use or the background concentrations, it's not really a surprise to us. What we did identify is there are some gaps in our monitoring network, and we're actually using some of our Gulf Hypoxia program funding to fill in those gaps. So we've got gauges and ambient monitoring going on right now in this Jackson Purchase region. So I thought I'd address that while the map is up. The other thing that we've been working to do is to quantify where we've done work. Now, what I find encouraging is that the areas where you see the higher concentrations generally of phosphorus, also where we've seen a lot of work. Now this is part of our success tracking mapper, which shows NRCS investments or NRCS BMPs by Huck 12. We can't do anything more granular than that because of stipulations in the Farm Bill. But Division of Conservation BMP practices, those are both agriculture, and those are in green and yellow. There are also these blue dots represent clean water, so sewer lines, investments. So that is also captured in this data. So that's through our public clean water SRF funding that go to utilities. I think in Lexington, there's a stormwater program, and they were generous enough to share some of that data with us about some of the programs that they've implemented to improve stormwater. And that's, that keeps that soil on the ground and keeps it minimizes the load reductions. Minimizes loading, nitrogen, phosphorus loading. And then the blue is data from our 319 program. So that's in the Division of Water. It's a watershed management branch 319 program. So that's an EPA program that we take funding, and we help communities identify different water quality needs that they have. And this in particular shows nitrogen, phosphorus reductions because of that. So the higher density or the higher density colors show greater reductions in phosphorus in this particular instance. So that's kind of where we've been, right? Like what we've both the loading side of things, but also some of the investments that have been made. And it's the green dots, I think, are NRCS investments. Let me see if it'll let me. Yeah, okay. So that's where we've been. And one of the things we also wanted to do, so this data on these large watersheds, that was through 2019 data that we analyzed through 2019 using a specific modeling structure. We updated that study last year using a flow normalized model that's more aligned with where national data is going. What we noticed is there was a need for us to provide data for comparison on a national level, but that aligns with some of these national metrics and models. Again, we don't want somebody else telling our story. We want to tell our story. We want to use our data to make sure we're communicating what we're seeing. And this flow normalized model is really helpful because it kind of teases out the interannual variability in both precipitation, weather, climate, the whole 9 yards, to see a little bit better what is the anthropogenic impacts on the landscape. And what we found was that generally we're seeing a downward trend in particularly smaller watersheds. For nitrogen, phosphorus is more of a mixed bag, and there's some very good reasons for that. I won't get into all of that here, but we have a study on the webpage that I believe is linked at the bottom about our flow normalized study that gets into more of the specifics. And what you'll notice is we are capturing some very large basins that go south into Tennessee, which is about 40% of Tennessee's drainage area. So what we're also using this to do is to partner with Tennessee to address some of those shared watersheds, because 90% of the Tennessee River, those loads, they don't come from us. Same thing with the Cumberland River. It's something like 60% of of that watershed is not in Kentucky. But we are able to actually capture that data and identify what those trends are, and then share that with our neighbors, and then work collaboratively to find solutions. So again, this strategy is being driven by empirical data, which is something we heard from our stakeholders after the 2014 strategy was drafted. That there was a desire to see more empirical data, so we've done that. Some of the other things that I think one of the other things I think is important is that some of the models show that atmospheric deposition of nitrogen is one of the leading drivers of nitrogen either growth or decline in the country. And what that means, and when I say nitrogen, anything that burns fossil fuels emits nitrous oxide, so NOx and SOx. So nitrous oxides in the NOx and SOx formula is the NOx. And what's really, really interesting is as the Clean Air Act amendments have come online, and different regulations have come online, you can see it in the data that there's been a decline in atmospheric deposition of nitrogen. So we are seeing the benefits on the ground in our water from what's happened in air regulations and air permitting. And so that's another win, I think, in this discussion of where Kentucky is. We are seeing the benefits of decades of investment and environmental programs. We can see it in the sky, but we can also see it in our data. Now, one of the things with our strategy, so that's kind of the background of the strategy. This is the data that's feeding our strategic focus. And we break that strategic focus down into areas that we need to invest statewide, and areas that we can invest or focus on specifically, like either industry specific or location specific. So the first thing I'll talk about is industry specific. So point sources. One of the drivers of, not the main driver, but one of the drivers of nitrogen effluent is wastewater treatment plants, or clean water treatment plants. And so one of the things we did a number of years ago is to do this optimization study pilot program, where certain wastewater facilities were given a little bit of incentive to test out this idea of optimization. If you tweak your processes, not necessarily an investment, but just changing, turning the knobs a little bit, turning on for blowers at certain times, you can see actually pretty substantial improvements in nitrogen treatment, and to a lesser extent phosphorus as well. So this is a graph showing Princeton. They did this study. This was in coordination with EPA, and they saw their total nitrogen over the course of about 2 years drop almost in half in their effluent, which was tremendous, right? And this is not a huge facility. This is not a Louisville or Lexington or Bowling Green facility, and they saw real improvements. Not only that, they saw substantial cost savings. So when you're turning off these high energy blowers, you're actually saving a lot of money. And so it's a win-win um, for these local wastewater facilities. So what we're doing is we're taking that the lessons from those pilot programs. We're also combining the lessons that Tennessee is learning because they're a few years ahead of us in this particular initiative, and we're including that in some of our new permits that are coming out. So we've had a number of facilities with new permits where, as a condition of the permit, they are required to do kind of an assessment of their facilities, see where they can optimize. Again, this saves facilities money and it improves environmental outcomes. This is something we've been coordinating with the industry for quite some time now through our Kentucky, well, it's what's now called a Kentucky Water Utilities Advisory Committee. So we have a subcommittee that I work with some industry leaders on to do this, and we have staff that now go out and provide these kind of audits on a no cost basis. So some of you all may know Paulette Akers. She is leading that initiative along with our permitting branch, and we'll do that. So if you have any questions about that or want to schedule an audit, please do. And I think her contact is in here somewhere towards the end. So that's one of the things we're doing. We're also going to be looking at phosphorus limits for permits. It's something that we've got in about 30% of our permits, and it's something that we report on every 2 years to the federal government. At least it's the number of permits that have limits. And we sit in a pretty decent position amongst other states. We're kind of in the middle. We're not the early adopters. We're not the ones in the back, which is kind of where we want to be. We want to watch the technology, make sure it's viable, and then work to adopt it. So when I said there's area specific priorities, and then there's industry specific priorities. So that was an industry specific priority. What we did is we took all of this data and we developed kind of area specific priorities. And that's reflected here in this map. What we did is we looked at areas where we had harmful algal blooms. That's in red. Those are the drainage areas where we had confirmed harmful algal blooms in the past decade. Because we know we have to protect recreation. We have to protect people's dogs and their kids. And so that becomes a priority area where we have a higher, well, in our internal funding mechanisms, those areas rank a little higher. We did the same thing with the high yield watershed. So that first map I showed with all those different colors, the ones that really stood out over and over and over again. The longer we do that study, we update it every few years, the same watersheds kind of show up. And so it clarifies that's where we look, and that's in gray here. And then the other thing that we have here is the source water protection areas. These are in blue. And this comes as a byproduct of our collaboration with NRCS and our source water protection program here in the Division of Water. We know that we have a need to protect source water that contributes to our drinking water for utilities, so drinking water utilities. And so these are areas we took these source water plans that drinking water utilities have developed, and we teased those out based on where do we have impairments on waterways, and what do our and where can we see additional improvement. And what we did is we took these source water areas, and NRCS which is a part of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, has made a commitment that they will spend at a minimum 10% of their program funds in source water protection areas. And when they do that, they give a higher cost share ratio to those farmers, and so those farmers can then they don't have to put as much money into um, the cost of implementing these practices, and that can be everything from heavy use areas for livestock to cover crops to keep soil on in the wintertime. It can be alternative water, so it takes cattle out of the creek and it provides clean water for livestock. Sometimes those are connected to the local water utility, and sometimes those are so it's a win-win. Or sometimes they actually develop spring water or something else that is clean and safe. Um, and so these are those areas where in our state programs, these tend to have a higher ranking, and then we're tracking where those investments are going, and we've already seen, for example, with the Division of Conservation, a higher percentage of their funds are going to these areas, even as those funding sources, the total funding is cut. They're putting more and more into these areas, and so that's kind of how we're trying to do more with the same or more with less. Is we're trying to maximize our resources in areas that we know have a greatest needs based on empirical data. Kind of continuing on those broad statewide categories. One of the things that we also developed right around 2020, and we've integrated this into our strategy, is this the Kentucky Ag Water Quality Act. So it is a law that was passed in the 90s that requires all farms over 10 acres to have a plan to protect water quality. It's been on the books for a while. We have a lot of farmers who've done it. But one of the things that we kept hearing from farmers is that they needed um, they needed something that was a little bit easier to access. The previous iterations of this had been like a 60-page PDF. And we had farmers saying, I need to have something I can do in my PJs, because these people are very, very busy. Farmers typically have multiple jobs. They may go work at another job and then farm in the evening or and weekends. And so there's that need to streamline that process. And so that's where we built this Kentucky Ag Water Planning tool that's an online resource where you can go in, identify where your farm is, and then it starts to help you pick and choose what BMPs you need or not what you need to do, but what might be more applicable. So if you say you have a livestock farm, row crop agriculture those BMPs don't really apply to you. And so instead of having to sift through what that all looks like, this BMP shows you examples, it links you to funding resources, and it asks you fewer questions so that you can get this done more effectively and create a better plan for your farm. And for some reason, this thing's not loading. But anyway, it's a fantastic resource, and we've had a really, really strong response from our farmers who said this is really helpful. We have been marketing this heavily at commodity fairs and with our partners in the agriculture community. And there's been strong uptake in this, and so we're really proud of that. The numbers continue to go up, but this is also required. So anyone applying for state cost share funding, for example, has to have an ag water plan. And you can either do that yourself, or the conservation districts or extension offices with the universities will help you build one. We've also seen that that people are really interested in specific types of BMPs, and so we've tried to provide like each of these BMPs now has photos that go along with it to better explain how those are developed, and then also some specifics that are agreed upon by the Ag Water Quality Authority. All righty, so that's agriculture. One of the other things that we've tried to communicate is our non-point source focus. So again, when I say we've prioritized our nutrient priority areas, one of the ways that comes out is in our 319 program, which provides it ranks a little higher when people apply for funding. Now, we can put all this stuff together all we want, but if we can't show what we've done and what's made a difference and where this has been invested, it really seems like we're going to have limited returns and buy-in. So what we've done is we've taken all this information, we've coalesced it into these kind of fact sheets that come up in our water quality branch integrated report. So it's our integrated report to Congress that says these are our water quality impairments. And oh, by the way, we can also tell you where we've spent money and how much we've seen in terms of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment reduction because of it. There's a handy little graphic that shows what projects were funded and what was done. And typically we went back to about 2007 with this information, 2007, and then to current, because that's kind of when that program was apples to apples. And before that, that program still existed back in the 90s, but the way it was structured doesn't make it analogous for comparing nitrogen reductions and investments in the same exact way. So understand that there's more that's been done. It's just it's hard to quantify that the further and further back you go. I mentioned the wastewater focus. You can see here those ones in red are ones that did the voluntary pilot program. Since then, we've had a number of other facilities that have either gotten permits or requested audits. And so what we'd like to do is in the next biennial report, which will be in 2026, well, it'll probably come out in the first quarter of 2027. We'll try and share some of the information about which facilities have taken those additional steps, either voluntarily or otherwise. And this is just a map showing where you have average phosphorus loading depending on the facility, and it's basically correlated to the size of the facility. You can see Louisville, Lexington, Bowling Green; those are higher concentrations of phosphorus because they're bigger. We're working to update the MS4 general permit. And one of the ways that we're assisting with that with the nutrient program is we've taken some of our Gulf hypoxia program funds that came under the bipartisan infrastructure law to update some MS4 resources that are going to be available to all MS4s. So regardless of size, we're taking some of the lessons learned from the larger utilities and from the smaller ones, and we're kind of coalescing it into a toolkit that's being actively developed right now. And we're engaged with that with the University of Kentucky and the Kentucky Stormwater Association. That was a long time ask that they had, and we had some funding available, and we're making that happen with existing Gulf hypoxia program funding, and then a new grant that should be coming in this year sometime. We're also focusing on education outreach. Like I said, we've been at conferences, commodity fairs, because we know that we have to build up the capacity to actually do the work. Let's see here. I'm going to move just over here so I can hit this button. We're working on a volunteer lakes monitoring program. And depending on how much time we have, I can talk more about that. But it's helping people who live on lakes and reservoirs to kind of provide information to us, and that helps as a kind of bit of an early warning system. And we've done a pretty substantial marketing push with our ag water quality plan. So we've got signs, posters. We're consistently at these resources. We have grazing sticks that we provide to extension classes that help with rotational grazing. So we're providing actual tools for producers in addition to the electronic tools. We're like I said, we're expanding that monitoring effort out in Western Kentucky, but we're also bringing new technology on board. We've got a drone boat with these nutrient capabilities, and so we're going to be testing that on a pilot. We're looking to do something with Harrington Lake because we've invested ag water quality funds both in the conservation installations around there, but there's also a OSG, or it's a department, it's a division of water and EPA grant to one of the wastewater utilities there to expand sewer out to Gwen Island. And so we want to be able to track the improvements because there will be real improvements in both nitrogen, phosphorus, but also E. coli. So we're wanting to kind of use some novel ways and technologies to track that progress and show what we're doing. Again, we're continuing to track our loads and yield studies that happen on a biennial basis, and this is the list of Kentucky streams and waterways with impairments through our integrated report. You can kind of click on this and explore it in this web browser, and you can also take you to that actual water integrated report. So that brings us to where are we going? We're building this nutrient network of stakeholders and partners to make the difference in our communities. And it's really, I mean, the strategy's been out for 2 years at this point, a little over 2 years, and we've just seen such tremendous engagement from local communities, from partners. For example, we have a really strong collaboration with Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. So it's our sister agency in Tennessee. We're going to be doing a presentation with them at the Kentucky Water and Tennessee Water Professionals Conference later this year. We're working on shared watersheds. We've worked with local groups to apply for federal grants. One of the things we've seen is that some other states are getting more grants than us, so we're going after them. That's what we're trying to do. We're investing in our wastewater and stormwater resources, as I mentioned, and agriculture BMPs. Tracking long-term trends. So one of the things I'll finish up with here is we've got this story map that kind of explains the Gulf Hypoxia program, which I kind of alluded to. It's a program that we have through the federal government with bipartisan infrastructure funding that we're investing both in monitoring, on the ground conservation. We're expanding optimization resources. That's what's funding those audits. The staff time, nutrient management planning through the Division of Conservation is being funded through this. Our staff resources, and we're going to continue to do that. So our second grant should carry us through about 2030. So this is a commitment on our end. And then we also just released our nutrient reduction strategy biennial reports for the first 2 years, kind of highlighting some of the metrics we committed to reporting on. Both of these you can explore these in these links here, and I'm probably not going to be able to get to all those right now, but we're kind of at the time where we can ask some questions. So I'm going to pause here and stop sharing my screen and take some questions. All right. Oh, we've got some good questions. Okay, Maria, would you like to ask a question?
Maria, your mic has been allowed, so if you want to unmute and ask your question, you can now.
Q&A. Can we get a PowerPoint of this presentation? So this presentation is all online at that eec.ky.gov nutrient page. So if you click on the Explore tab on the right, that shows all of this. So you can explore it, and there's more data. Yeah. We want to make this as open and accessible as possible. My goal is to provide as many rabbit holes as anybody can possibly want. Right, so there's a little bit of something for everybody in there. Knowing that this is a really big and wide group of stakeholders. We have everybody from agriculture to cities to NGOs, groups that work with watersheds or local water quality concerns. And so there's a need for a lot of different types of information for different folks. So MS4s, I believe there is a list of all MS4s in the state. Yes, there are. I'm just looking at the chat here. So the questions about MS4s. There is data. I would counsel you look at there's a website called the Digital Geospatial Information Service. I think it is DGI. Look up Kentucky DGI, and there's some information there about that. Question: has there been a task force in similar vein for remediation of DBPs in source water? I'm not familiar if there has been. DBPs. Yeah, that would be if there's a federal task force for that. I wouldn't be aware of it just because everything I work on is so strictly nutrients. Yeah. Disinfection products. Yeah. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. So I'm not sure if I'd be the right person to ask that question. But I know our drinking water branch would probably have a good handle on that. Source water protection. If you're interested in that, Dale Booth with our source water protection program in the Division of Water has a lot of experience with source water. I know that a number of the different constituents that affect source water are included often in the source water protection planning efforts. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but hopefully it does. There's something else in Q&A. No. Cool. All right. And if you have any questions about this, we have a couple of other resources available to you. There is in addition to what's on the website, we also have nutrient work groups. So if you're interested in this and it is something that there's a particular need you have or you anticipate coming, we have work groups. We have an agriculture work group. We have a public agencies work group. We have an NGOs work group, and we have a utilities work group, and they all have somewhat different focuses, but they all work towards this similar goal. And eventually we're going to try and have kind of a more coalesced work group that kind of meets all together. And we're actually talking with Tennessee about having a combined meeting with them and their hypoxia task force group in Tennessee. We've been doing that collaboration. We've gone to their events, they've come to ours. But I think it'll be really helpful for our partners to be able to see that too. So we're working to plan that hopefully sometime this year. So reach out to me if you have any questions about that or want to be engaged. We would love to have you. And we actually have different we have like the meeting summaries for all of those meetings that we've already had. on that. The link at the bottom of the presentation we went through today, on the biennial report, we have links to all of our work group meetings and what the summaries, because we have these forms that we have Q&A, we have back and forth, and kind of the anonymous summarized results from our members are summarized there as well. On a more general basis, we have a quarterly nutrient newsletter. So if you'd like to be a part of that, I can add you to the listserv, and I'd be happy so that way you kind of can stay in the loop from some of the things that are going on. Is crop rotation an important factor that affects nutrient runoff? Yes, crop rotation is helpful. That's also an agronomic thing, because corn tends to use up more nitrogen in the soil, whereas soybean puts a little bit more back in. Then if you okay, okay, I'll add you to the nutrient newsletter, Jamie. Yeah, so soybeans and corn usually are in rotation for agronomic purposes. There's been a concerted push to use less and less fertilizer because it has just become so expensive. If you look at the price increase over the past 30 years, it's upwards, it's almost 1,000%. It is very high. And so farmers are working to use less fertilizer or be more strategic about it. So that plays into that crop rotation. But again, that's something that I would look at, that ag water quality planning tool. There's a lot of resources there. We have static sheets that say, this is when it comes to crop rotation, this is what's helpful, and that is, I think, one of the BMPs, the ag water quality BMPs, is crop rotation. Hopefully that helps. Great. Yeah, so I'm going to put my email in the chat here. If you want to follow up with me about anything, feel free to send me a message. Jana, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it, and the ability to share this information with other people.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know I learned a whole lot. I didn't know a whole lot about nutrient reduction strategies. So this was very eye-opening for me, and I appreciate you coming and joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and like Josiah said, if you have any questions, I always say this, but I know, in a couple hours from now, a couple of days from now, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm sure he's more than happy to answer any questions. And like I said, if you have any additional questions about any other air, water, waste regulations, whatever they may be, always feel free to reach out to the Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. And if we don't know the answer, we can get you in contact with the expert or somebody who is better off and able to assist you. Before we end, I do just want to let everybody know about some of our upcoming events. So if you see my screen, in 2 weeks, I believe, actually, April 24th, we do have our next Waste 101 Introductory Permitting and Compliance Workshop. It's a virtual workshop, a part of our Air, Water, and Waste 101 series. And then our next two ECAP recaps, I want to go ahead and plug. On May 14th, we are having our webinar featuring the Kentucky Brownfield program. And then on July 9th, we're going to have a special webinar focused on how to address an NOV from scientists within our Division of Enforcement here at the Department for Environmental Protection. So we would love for you to join any of those upcoming events or workshops. And like I said, feel free to send us an email or give us a call if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you again, Josiah, for joining us today. We hope you all have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you'll be able to make it to one of our upcoming events as well. Thank you all.